Never stop reading the Bible. Today, we're jumping right into the middle of one of the most explosive moments in history, the very first days of the early church. We're going to look at how this small, passionate group of followers started to get organized and the incredible, and I mean incredible, challenges they faced right out of the gate. This is the story of their survival, straight from the book of Acts, chapters 4 through 6. So after the initial spark that started it all, this new community in Jerusalem didn't just grow, it exploded. People were flocking to this message of hope, this new way of living built on sharing everything. But as anyone who's ever been part of something that's growing fast knows, with growth comes growing pains. And that's really the big question here, isn't it? How does a passionate idea, a movement actually, survive its own success? How do you go from being a small group of friends to a citywide phenomenon without completely falling apart? Well, the story of how they pulled it off, how they built something that would last, really comes down to three critical tests they had to pass. A test from the outside, a test from the inside, and a test of their own ability to adapt. Okay, so let's get into this first test. As the movement got more and more popular, it was inevitable that it would catch the attention of the people in charge. And the established religious authorities, they saw this fast-growing group as a major threat to their power and the way things were always done. And check out how quickly things escalated. It all kicks off with a public miracle, something undeniably good. But that good deed gets the leaders, Peter and John, thrown in jail. And when they're hauled in front of the council, they don't apologize, they don't back down, they double down, giving all the credit to their leader. The council is speechless. They can't deny the miracle happened, so all they can do is threaten them. And this was their response. Can you imagine the courage? They're told by the most powerful men in the city to shut up, and they just turn it right back on them with this powerful question. They basically say, who are we supposed to listen to, you or God? It was a total game changer. Now here's the most important part. You'd think getting arrested and threatened would make everyone scatter, right? But it had the exact opposite effect. This pressure from the outside didn't crush them. It actually forged them, making them stronger and more unified than ever before. It solidified what they were all about. All right, on to the second test. And in a lot of ways, this one was even more dangerous. Why? Because the threat wasn't coming from an outside enemy anymore. This time it was coming from the inside. This was a test of their character, their very integrity. So the crisis centers on this couple, Ananias and Sapphira. They wanted all the credit for being radically generous without actually being radically generous. And let's be clear, the problem wasn't that they kept some of the money for themselves. The problem was the lie. They pretended to give it all, and that deception threatened the foundation of trust the entire community was built on. The consequences were severe, and they sent a shockwave through the whole group. Think about it. In a community built on radical honesty and sharing, trust isn't just a nice feature, it's the entire operating system. This lie was like a virus. The incident established a very serious, very clear standard. Integrity was absolutely non-negotiable if they were going to survive. And that brings us to the third and final test. And the irony here is that this one was caused by their own incredible success. They were just growing so fast that the simple, informal way they had been doing things started to completely break down. As more people from different backgrounds joined up, a real problem surfaced. The community was taking care of its widows, making sure they got food every day. But a complaint arose that the Greek-speaking widows were being overlooked, while the Hebrew-speaking widows were getting their share. It was a cultural and logistical failure, plain and simple. Now, the leaders had a choice. They could try to manage every little detail themselves, or they could trust others. They realized they were stretched too thin. They couldn't be spiritual guides and also manage food distribution. Their solution was simple, and it was brilliant. Delegate. So this crisis actually forced them to innovate. They created a brand new role in the community. They chose 7 well-respected people and put them in charge of this practical problem. This new role, the deacon, comes from a Greek word diakonos, which just means one who serves. It was a role designed specifically to handle the practical needs of a growing community. And you know what? It worked perfectly. By creating this new layer of organization, they not only fixed the food problem and healed the cultural rift, they also created a model that could scale. This new structure meant they could keep growing without being crippled by their own success. So what's the big takeaway from all this? When you look back at this 2,000-year-old story, you see a powerful blueprint for what makes a community resilient. It shows that a strong group isn't one that avoids problems, but one that confronts them. By facing down an external threat, an internal crisis, and a structural breakdown, they forged a kind of DNA based on three things: a commitment to a higher purpose, a demand for absolute integrity, and the genius to adapt and change when needed. This has been an explainer from the Center Studio.